Have I spoken to any of you about parent, adult, child?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Let's do a quick, let me give you, this will be useful, I hope, I think. So in general, in life, we can inhabit one of three spaces. This is very broad. We can be in our child self, and that at its positive end is when we're at our most playful and creative and exploratory and sort of bold and childlike. But at the more negative end, it can be when we're very emotionally reactive or feel a bit sullen or very vulnerable, fearful. That playing small feeling that we sometimes have, that's us in our kind of childlike self. And then so that's child. Then there's parent mode. And again, I want you to think about yourself in relation to this, because we all inhabit all three of these spaces at different times. Our parent mode is our kind of, well, it can be maybe a bit patronizing. It's our shoulds. It's our shoulding, you know, you should do this and this should be done, and I should do this. And it can be a bit punitive. It can be over assertive or controlling. That's what I'm looking for. So when we are in those spaces, we're kind of in our parent persona. And that's got a positive side too, when we're most nurturing and arm round and kind of supportive from a place of greater strength than another. That's us in parent mode. And then there's our adult mode, which is our most functional and considered self. Those other roles can be important to step into at times, best if we do it knowingly. None of us do that. We're all kind of, you know, in these different spaces. Our adult self is responsive rather than reactive, sets healthy boundaries, chooses decisively, you know, uses judgment, has the courage to talk straight with people and address issues rather than blaming or hiding when there is an issue that needs to be resolved. Is this resonating? Do you recognize, are you wrapping your head around these three roles? Here's how they're useful to think about. They're useful in terms of our interpersonal relationships. So when we're relating to another person, the most functional way to relate to another adult is from our adult self. But what can happen is, if we are triggered, we may go into our more child self, or sometimes we default to our adult self. We might get a bit controlling or be a bit shoulding on people, waggy finger, a bit punitive, or a bit patronizing. And it is well psychologically researched that when someone goes into parent mode, it's likely to trigger child mode in the other person. And when someone is triggered into child mode or goes into child mode, it is likely to trigger parent mode in the other person. So what I've just heard, Emily, is that your boss was a little bit patronizing, adopted a parent type persona. Not knowingly, we don't do these things knowingly, but that's how the relationship in that moment kind of happened. It is likely that induced a childlike feeling in you. Now, you might have managed that. You've got a good toolkit around this, or you might not have done. So when he patronized you, you might have felt small and closed down, or you might have felt a bit churlish, you know, sod off, who are you? Or it might have made you feel angry and emotional. Those are all kind of child type responses, and totally understandable, by the way. But when you understand this dynamic, again, it's that awareness is half the battle. You can start noticing, they're doing parent on me. I'm feeling inclined to get into my child space. The most powerful thing to do is to regulate yourself back to adult. Because if they've gone into parent and you present adult, guess what happens to them?
child.
Go on, Karen, say it.
They revert into child. You've kind of challenged that parent mode.
Not quite. If
Oh, okay.
you come into adult,
Oh,
they're
they both
likely to come into adult as well.
there. Okay.
If you go into child or then flip into adult, they're likely to get pushed into child. It's what, if you think of dysfunctional working relationships, when two people are sort of at loggerheads, it's because they're just triggering each other back and forth. You know, one snipes at the other or implies that they let the side down, parent. The other person has an emotional defensive reaction, child, then tries to kind of gain ground by then counter accusing or, you know, shoulding on the other person, and then the other person gets triggered. It just takes one person to sort of fill the adult space, and then different things can happen. So it's great, the other person might meet you at adult, or their behavior starts to show up as not very adult. You know, so it's a very strong position to be able to take yourself, change your own state into adult. And you can do it through breath. You can do it through, you know, being in your hands, feeling your body, thinking, what do I want to do here? And to do nothing is often a very positive choice. You know, he's just said this slightly patronizing thing. I'm feeling reactive. I'm just going to let that one sail by. And very much, you know, whatever the next thing I say is, I'm going to say it very much from a place of adult. So that's a useful model when you think of how you relate to others.